Suarez coming to you with the Personal Finance and Money Management Class 1. I'm excited to bring some of the information to you guys because it's going to be very helpful for you. And let's go ahead and get started. So just to give you a little background about myself, I have about 3 years of experience in the financial industry, retail banking. I worked in a sales position where I was opening accounts, giving advice on credit cards, financing, investments, different products. But my primary focus was to generate profit and revenue for a large company. Aside from that, I had 10 years of experience in student leadership and development. I developed my own business right out of college where I was developing mentoring programs to help ESL students and at-risk students really see the value and focus on, or the value in focusing on higher education and their careers. And I have about 5 years of committee and advisory experience where I was on the board of different companies, primarily political companies, educational companies, 501c3s, nonprofit organizations that focus on improving the quality of life in people in the community. So I'm actually very honored and proud to be back at Bergen. I actually graduated from Bergen, so I'm an alumni. Finished my master's about a month ago through an accelerator program. So it's interesting. I mean, I'm back here teaching 3 courses, all online. This one's about personal finance. So we're going to really focus on the 2 aspects of personal finance, right? Which is the income, how much money you make, and the expense, which is associated with your cost to stay alive. These aren't the textbook definitions. These are just the practical definitions on how you want to understand it, right? The book doesn't talk much about the first piece because I guess it assumes that in general everybody's going to make a certain amount of money and live according to that. But I think from personal experience, if you don't focus on number 1, if you don't focus on how you're going to make money, you're going to spend a lot of time wasted doing things that just don't benefit you and don't benefit your overall goal. The second piece, as far as expense, it's really dependent on the first, because what happens is what you spend is relative to what you make. And those people who don't take that into account and spend more than they make end up in debt or in situations that are like that, where they owe somebody or feel like they don't have the freedom to do as they wish because they have to work for someone, or their schedule is not dictated by them but by the companies that hire them, right? So in essence, right, people will always say, if you ask them what's something that you wish you had more of, right? The obvious answer that people come up with is money, right? But money is just, if I could use the right word, a metaphor, or it's a replacement, or it's a placeholder for what they really want, which is autonomy, freedom, opportunities, access. Because money gives you those things, right? And if we could have those things without the money, I'm sure more people would approach those options, but they're not inherently obvious to us on how to find that or how to get that. But fortunately, with this class, we show how we could get more money so we could open those opportunities for ourselves. So in the first week, we highlighted the best case scenario and the worst case scenario in the assignment. I reviewed some of them, and I was a bit shocked at how some people kind of gave the obvious answer, right? Where since the first chapter was on, developing uh, the habits in personal finance, budgeting, some of the key concepts, right? It says, well, in the best case scenario, I'll be better with my money. Worst case scenario, I'll be broke, right? That's obvious. But you know, it's really for those students. I recommend taking a more tangible approach, right? I'll give you an example. A friend of mine, um, right now, dropped out of school, living with his parents, a couple years older than me, right? Jumping from job to job. I think right now he works at a gas station pumping gas. Um, and he may look back at his life or look at his situation currently and think to himself, man, I wish that I had X amount of dollars, or I wish I had a career that could help me to get out of my situation, living with my parent, living in my mom's basement, right? Um, or I wish that I had the funds to buy my own car. Maybe he's using his parents' car, right? That is partly because of the choices that he's made up until that point, right? Because the reality is, if he wanted to finance his independence or finance his dreams, whether it's going to school or paying for a professional certificate or taking the time to apply for the jobs that are going to make him more revenue or the jobs that are going to utilize his skill set, right? That takes some effort. That takes time. That takes a plan of action, right? And if his vision was to still live with his mom, um, approach uh, an age where he's slightly older than his peers and not as accomplished as his peers, or in a position where money is a struggle and he's living paycheck to paycheck. If that was his goal, then he's successful. But I doubt that many people in that position are happy and satisfied with the state and condition of their lives. And I would challenge that. Now, if that was the case, that he was in that position at, let's say, 18, 20, 24 even, right? Be very different. But at the age he's at, it could be very frustrating because you feel like you're delayed from where you feel you should be, right? For him, this is the worst case scenario. But had he had looked back at it 5 years and said, worst case scenario, I'll end up in the same place. Best case scenario, I could be wealthier, happier, more liberated, have my own place, have assets, have investments, feel confident, um, have opportunities presented to me. Those are things that motivate a person to wake up every day, to work beyond the 9 to 5, to push themselves beyond their limits. And those are the things that you want to focus on, right? Instead of, let me just get an A in this class, or let me just hand in the assignments. Because let's face it, right? If you do the work, or you do the assignments, and you get an A, but at the end of the year, or at the end of your college experience, you end up with $20,000 to $30,000 in debt, no job, no opportunities, right? Do you think that this class was worth it because you got the A versus the person who may get a B plus or even a B, but understands the principles and concepts that are being taught in this class and is able to apply it so that way coming out of the class they have money invested in 401k, assets that add value to their lives versus deplete value, and a mindset on how to be successful and to achieve their goals. Which one do you think is more valuable? So in essence, it's kind of like the assignment was kind of like a vision board. As you can see here, you have the one girl who's, has a lot of money in her hands, very happy, right? And then you have Monopoly uh, piece or Monopoly card that it says the words broke underneath. So there's two conflicting ideas, right? Um, and sure, there are people that are somewhere in the middle, but the aspects that really define how you get to, let's say, a position of wealth and affluence versus a position of suffering and inability to make the choices that are really going to improve your life, it's fourfold, right? You have your career, you have your circle of influence, the people that are around you that can help you to make an impact or a change, your social life, what you do with your leisure time, and also your hobbies. All these things help to affect your overall outcome, right? So take this equation for example. What we have here on the x-axis is the movement of time, right? And up here we have on the y-axis how much money we have access to make, right? And this equation right here is in reference to this line that shows how much money we make over time. So how much money, M, is equal to a function, this F here means function, of wage and time, which is very obvious. If minimum wage is $7.25, you're making $7.25 per hour, $7.25 per hour. If this is 10 hours here, you'd be making $72.50, right? Over here, instead, we actually put it as a limited amount. And we limit this by H, how many hours we use for leisure, right? So what I'm actually writing over here is it's the same function. The money you make is a function of wages and time, but the time function is actually, or time is actually a function of how many hours you give up of free time, right? And that would be denoted, or that would be shown, right, by 24 hours in a day here and how many hours of free time you're giving up. So if you decide to give up 24 hours of your free time, you're at this point here, the maximum amount of money you can make, right? But then if you decide to not work at all and give up no hours, you end up with $0, or the minimum amount of money you could make, right? But then what you notice here is that this line is actually a different wage amount, right? And wage is actually a function of your capacity. So if minimum wage was $7, whatever your capacity is based on your training and your experience, that value would be added to this number here, right? Which overall would change this function entirely and change the potential amount that you could make. So what is this instance saying, right? So there's two components to how much money you could earn. The rate at which you're paid per hour and the amount of time you associate with the work. However, if you look at the wage function, there is a component that is based on improving your capacity and giving up some of your leisure time towards training, learning, experiencing things that add value to your life. Okay? Now, if we drew out the wage potential, how much money you could potentially earn, and the amount of time that we are putting towards training, we see that there is, and this, unfortunately, this is an assumption, an exponential growth based on how much time you spend working and learning. Of course, this assumption is based on the original Pareto principle as well as some of the statistics. If you look up, right, on average, how much associates makes, someone with an associate's degree makes, someone with a bachelor's degree makes, someone with a master's degree, someone with a doctorate degree, you'll find that on each level there is more money made on average, right? So, but the assumption is because of the Pareto principle, if you become that person who excels in their field and is an expert and is sharp as a tack, really trying to nail it and get it every time, you are more valuable to any company that you work for. But it takes time. And because it takes time, the amount of money that you are giving up that you could be making is this amount here, right? And this amount here is what I like to call the FML gap. Because that is the point where people say, why didn't I take the time to go to school or to get trained so that way I could be making more money, right? But the reality is that, unfortunately, not everybody has the opportunity to go to school. Not everybody has the opportunity that you guys do to get this information. But when they do, it's a matter of what they do with it. But unfortunately, because people would rather get this amount here, they decide, you know what, I'm not going to take the time, whatever that time is, this amount here, to study because I could potentially be making more money. But the reality is, in a lifetime, based on the sacrifice, you would make more money in the long run versus how much money you would make in the short run. Sacrifice yields returns in the future. And this is true in most cases of students who go to school and study. I'm not going to lie to you and say everybody that graduates is going to have a better job, or everybody who studies finance and banking or economics is going to be wealthy and rich, because the reality is that's not the case, right? There are other variables that determine wealth, and I'm not talking about race or ethnicity or sex or no. What I'm talking about is the variables that determine wealth, that determine affluence, that determine success in a career, are very intrinsic in nature and refer to aspects that go beyond just where you're from and what you have access to. And in the extreme cases where people fit those variables to the T 100%, they end up making more regardless of their race. They end up making more regardless of their sex. They make more regardless of the education of their parents, whether they come from single parent homes. And they are the exceptions, right, to what society might say is happening everywhere, you know. But these people have also made the necessary sacrifices to yield what they have now. They went to school. They put the 80 hours a week versus the 40 hours that everybody else was putting in. These people pushed beyond the limits of what conventional wisdom tells us would make people successful. They work twice as hard, 3 times as hard. And that's the reality. Because there's a time value of money, right? The question I always give students whenever I want to make an example: what's more valuable, $1 today or $1 tomorrow? And most people will say $1 today. I want it right now. If I said what's more valuable, $1 today or $2 tomorrow, some people will say, oh yeah, give me the $2 tomorrow. But the reality is, you know, if you don't see me tomorrow, you're not going to get the $2. Versus if you see me right now, you're going to get that $1. So there's a value to having money and access to money right now. And that value is charged as interest. And who charges it? If you have a savings account, you're charging that interest to the banks for holding your money. If you have a credit card, the banks are charging you that interest for lending you that money. So these are things that you need to kind of take into account and think about. A good example is the Rule 72, which is often utilized to determine how long it would take for you to double your money. And the way you would do that is you would take your interest rate and divide it into 72. And that will actually tell you based on a compounding interest, which means that the interest is added on to the principal or the amount of money you have in the account, and it will tell you how long it'll take, how many years it will take for whatever amount you have to double. So if time is associated with the value of money, then why are we wasting time and wasting money? There's an example that the same professor, Jordan Peterson, gives that says if you take into account the value of your time now with respect to how much money you're going to make in your lifetime, and you roughly calculated at $50 an hour, then every hour that you are spending that isn't associated or isn't getting you closer towards your goal or closer towards what you want in life, it's pretty much the equivalent of taking $50 and shoving it down the toilet. Now, don't get me wrong. I do need free time. I do need to spend some time playing video games or spend some time with the boys or playing soccer. Yeah, those things are a part of who we are. What I'm saying is, those of you who have not yet decided to put your 100% into your education, or put 100% into your career, or take responsibility for some of the things that are around you that could benefit from you being 100% involved. These are the things that demand our attention. And by you not taking the time or putting the focus or putting the energy to really improve the situation of these things is a disservice to you. And if quantifying it to a point where, you know what, I could potentially be making more of myself, and at the same time putting myself in a position where I could really do some damage and bring some good to the world, it's sad. And if you have to think about it, take the time, step back, and think in the positive mindset, right? In the positive vision that you place for yourself. At that point, you say, I'm probably making about $100 an hour, $300 an hour, right? But in order to get to that point, I need to do X, Y, and Z. And every moment that I'm not doing X, Y, and Z, every hour that I decide to do something opposite of that, I might as well take $300 out of my bank account and flush it down the toilet, because I am wasting my time and I am wasting my money. And if you're in school doing that, if you go to class and you're not 100% engaged in what you should be learning, or because sometimes even the education can get away with that. If I'm not learning in the college or the course that I'm in, and you have to drop the course to find something that's really going to put you in a place that could help you to influence and impact and make a difference, then you have to do that, because you're wasting money, you're wasting time. And again, I don't want you to say, okay, Professor Suarez told me to drop my English class because I'm wasting time and I want to be, I want to be a dancer. Listen, there's a practical side to everything as well. And I say all these things with the hope that you have the discernment to be able to understand that there's a process for these things. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't just become a millionaire unless you're Elon Musk, right? And this guy's freaking brilliant, a genius, right? What I'm saying is to have some prudence, to do the research, and to take this seriously, because if you don't, the alternative is a scenario that you do not want to be in, and that after a while becomes impossible to get out of. It's a hole, a darkness that overwhelms you, and that's something that you really want to consider avoiding. So what are the options, right? As you can see here, there are savings and CDs that you could put your money into. And I would recommend looking into the annual percentage yield, which is the interest rate or the time value associated with putting the money in these accounts. Now, take into account that when you put your money in a bank, what the bank is actually doing is it's investing it and making profit on your money. But putting it in a savings and a CD, it's FDIC insured, which means it's the federal government insures your money, so it does not have the potential of loss. Versus investments, which is the second option, will have the potential of loss, right? So savings and CDs are the safer option. CDs, certificates of deposits, are held for longer periods of time, so they're locked in amounts that the bank is willing to pay you larger interests for to keep the money held there. And at that time, they are investing your money and making a profit. Now, investments, there are a couple different types of investments you could make. Some examples of the investments, which we'll go over in later chapters, are ETFs, which are chunks or portions of investments that you could actually get into without fully having to pay the full amount. There are mutual funds, which are a pool of different investments that are managed by a company or a firm that have a diverse set of investments. So if you could imagine, let's say the whole class got all their money together, right? Everybody put in $5, and let's say we have a class of 20, so we have $100. So with that $100, we could invest in an investment or a stock or what have you that costs $100. Now, if it was just us as individuals and each of us only had $5, we could only invest in something that costs $5. So what people have developed are mutual funds or even hedge funds, which is another form of that, where they pool their assets and their money and use that large pool of money, to invest in things that they probably wouldn't be able to invest in on their own. The key with mutual funds, though, is that the risk is lower than, let's say, investing in a stock or a bond. Now, stocks and bonds are individual or are pieces of companies that you can invest in. But all these options, right, are things to consider as far as where you could put your money. Startup business is a type of investment, but it's an investment in yourself, where you are developing a business or an idea that could help generate revenue. And the main proponent or the main person who is initiating the company is actually yourself. So, an example would be if you decided to open a pizzeria, right? And you took some of your money to buy some of the materials to do that. That's an investment as well. But it's a different type of investment because you are the person who is generating the revenue and generating the profit. The other option is real estate, which is another word for buying a house. And it's an option that you have. And then the last option, which is another type of investment, is Forex or Bitcoin. And Forex is just a shortened term for foreign exchange, buying cash, euro, yen, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and these are some of the hot topics now because of the cryptocurrencies exchange that just developed recently. But because it's new, it has a lot of risk associated with it. So some of the obstacles that you'll find with respect to making money is that the low amount of knowledge you have is also associated with a high amount of risk, which risk is just the possibility of loss. The other aspect that affects how much money you make is inflation, and inflation is the cost of holding money. So what tends to happen is if there's a lot of money in the market, and by market I mean if there are people who are spending money, the more money that's being spent, the higher the chance that products will have their prices raised. And you might be saying, why is that? Well, let's say, for example, you have a store and you know that, okay, let's say you have a store that sells chocolate, right? And let's say you know that on Valentine's Day, you're going to have more customers buying chocolate because there's going to be a high demand for the chocolate that you're selling. You say, well, I could sell it for $1 and make, let's say you have 100 customers, make $100. Or I could sell it for $5 and make $500. Which is the better option? Obviously, the $5. Is the chocolate any different from $1 to $5? No, it's the same chocolate. The only difference is because you know that the demand is high and that customers will buy at $5, you go ahead and do that. And the inflation, the amount that the cost has changed for that product is $4. Now, you may say to yourself, well, how do I know if the demand is going to change, or how do I know if there's going to be more money in the market? How do you tell these things? Over time, inflation tends to go up and money tends to devalue over time. Why? Because as the economy grows and people are paid more and more over time, they're going to spend more. And because more people are spending, what happens? Inflation. Okay? How this affects you is if you're holding money and you're not investing it and you're not buying, that money is going to lose value. So your protection against that is putting it in a savings that earns interest higher than the inflation rate, or invested in an asset that either retains value or gains value. And these are the options that you have to combat against inflation. So with that being said, I think the obvious option is to hurry up and make money. As you see here, this is actually the Extra Credit app. On the right side over here is when I first started using the app, right? It's very, the app is called Robinhood. And the reason I like it is because you could put as little as $1 a day and that start investing. As you can see here, I lost a lot of money because I was still trying to figure out which products to invest in, right? But over time, I was able to make some of the money back, and get a little bit of profit. Which over here I got 1.65%, which isn't a lot, and it's like 32 cents, right? In the last 3 months, though, this little drop here is actually this drop over here. These are the same drops. So I was able to make a substantial amount more by reviewing the information, learning, and applying it. But if I had just decided not to even try or attempt it, I would have ended up not even making money, or I would have been in a position where I'm just kind of like stagnant. And the obvious key here isn't necessarily this part here, right? Because I mean, it's a small amount, it's only 35 bucks, right? But this part here, figuring out how to make 50% more. This is 42% return, meaning that if I had invested $10, right, 50% would have been $5. If I invest $100, 50% increase would have been $150. What's the difference? I made $5 here. I made $50 here. Right? So it's not a matter of how much, but the process on that I use to make more money. So what I recommend is if you're interested, go ahead and download the app. And what you're going to do is you're going to put the friend code here, August48, and we both get a free stock. What we have going is the student who is able to get the highest percentage of return is going to get a free stock as well. I'm still deciding what stock, but you know, we'll take a look at it. I'll probably have to end up giving you the value of the stock instead of just the stock, but yeah, I mean, that's always a good incentive. And on top of that, just by doing it, if you're able to beat out the professor, you get a couple points at the end of the semester. But again, if the Pareto principle's in effect, you'd probably have to work hard to beat me out. But you know, I've been slacking, so you might have a chance. If there's any question, feel free to contact me. Again, my email is asuarez1@bergen.edu. You could also text me based on the number that I have on the profile. All right, class. This has been Professor Suarez. Thank you so much for tuning in, and hope to hear from you guys soon. Good luck with class and take care.